what are your big picture takeaways? Microsoft doesn't look good. They highlighted the strong dollar, which Google highlighted as well, though their results looking somewhat better.
Yeah, I think there were narrow misses across the board, Emily. I think people have been kind of waiting to see when do we finally hit that inflection point where the beats stop. The market's been selling like these companies haven't been performing for the past few quarters, and actually they have been performing quite well. Now we've got a number of factors. You've got FX, you've got the Ukraine, Russia, you've got shutdowns in China, and all of these were impacting Microsoft's numbers. But if you look, there were pretty narrow misses on both top and bottom line. I think Microsoft said there was something like $1 billion tied to the shutdowns that I mentioned in China, to the FX impact, as well as the Ukraine, Russia. And that's actually about 6 cents, which would have taken them to hitting that EPS target. The cloud number at 40% is still good. It's decelerating a little bit. And you saw Dynamics 365, the ERP, which is something I've been looking close at enterprise software buying. That number stayed really strong. But some of the other areas, again, it just seemed like narrow misses everywhere, Emily. And so that was Microsoft. And of course, what you mentioned with Google is the ad market seemed to be stronger with Alphabet than people had expected. It has slowed. But the question is, do people outside of us who are watching this every day realize we're in a recession? If you saw Prime Day, if you look at the advertising spend, it looks like people are still shopping.
Shopping indeed. I just got off the phone with Alphabet CFO Ruth Porat, and she used that word uncertainty a number of times. I'm expecting to get even more color on the earnings call with Sundar Pichai about just what kind of uncertainty. But here she says uncertainty is the best way to characterize what we're seeing. But the reality of the data is that it's complicated. The results reflect the lapping of significant growth last year, plus uncertainty in the global economic environment. And what she talked about was that there are a variety of factors at play here, but it's really challenging to disaggregate them. So, they're continuing to use this word uncertainty. What do you take away from that?
Well, it's a reason we're having a hard time deciding whether or not we're in a recession right now. You see some of the numbers indicate that there's still strength. There's some growth across tech, because again, all these numbers are growth on a year-over-year basis. So we thought 2021 had all this digital transformation acceleration, and these numbers are better. Now, they're decelerated growth for both Google and for Microsoft, but they're up on a year-over-year basis. So people are spending more money on technology, more money on advertising than a year ago when we thought the market was growing at an explosive rate. So now we're entering this slowdown period. We've got inflation, we've got FX, we've got interest rate hikes. And I think some of the reason that there's some enthusiasm about these misses is we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting to see some of this Fed policy, some of the monetary policy that's coming into place actually having companies start to slow down, having guidance start to slow down and say, look, some of what's happening is working. The demand is slowing. But I still lean that enterprise tech, I still lean that e-commerce and platforms will be remarkably strong because we've become hyper dependent on them throughout the pandemic. I don't see that changing. And companies that are going to want to wade their way through this slow in the economy are going to be looking to technology to help automate, to invest in AI and utilize cloud technologies to actually scale their businesses with less big overhead resources and, of course, slowed hiring, which means technology is going to have to take the brunt of the weight.
Now, when it came to advertising specifically, she talked about the growth driven by travel and retail, which continue to be strong. Makes sense, of course, as we are coming out, hopefully, of a pandemic. But she did talk about the pullback, and she used that word pullback by some advertisers, reflecting uncertainty about a number of factors they view as, again, as I said, challenging to disaggregate. What do you make of her use of that word pullback? Because everybody is wondering, is what we saw with Snap and Twitter going to impact Google as well? Is Google somehow immune to this, given that it is such a broad-based business, or not?
Well, the numbers indicate that there's clearly prioritization. And so Google seems to be above the fold, whereas we saw what happened to Snap and what's happened to Meta over the past few quarters, where there has been more pullback. And of course, Ruth Porat was saying they're seeing some pullback too, but that's more deceleration than overall slowing of growth altogether. The indicators here are that companies that are going to go online still believe Google is their best bet, if not, one of their best bets, and that's why we're continuing to see the spend there. I do think some companies that understand what's going on are starting to look at whether that's slowing hiring, slowing ad expense. We're seeing that across the board. We've heard the announcements from companies that are going to do less hiring, that are going to spend less on advertising, and that's part of this period of economic uncertainty and slowdown. So none of this is surprising. I think smart companies understand you cannot entirely save your way to growth in the future, but you might want to slow down temporarily until we get a good handle of what's going on here. And There are so many factors, so much inconsistency in the data, and that's why, like I said, we're having a hard time making final decisions. The Fed's having a hard time, the markets are having a hard time, because we're seeing some numbers look good and some numbers look incredibly bad or at risk right now.